Hey guys, Replayz here. I'm just going to quickly going to be making this video to do you guys a quick run through of the changes to the jungle and what it means for you guys when you're playing solo queue and when you're playing these high school games. Basically, ever since the scuttle changes last patch, the spawn timer on the scuttle has changed to 3 minutes 15. So the jungle meta has shifted completely since before we had a big level 2 meta who can contest the scuttle on spawn. And now it's a bit later time. It gives more impact on these people who can clear an entire path faster, and so you ideally want to be hitting level 4 at that 3:30 after you've killed the scuttle. So basically, first thing I'm going to go through is your pathing, and then I'm going to go through which junglers are, S tier, A tier, and then at the end I'm going to recommend some champions for you guys to try out in your own solo queue games. And then of course for high school as well. So the best champs that are kind of good in solo queue and also great and competitive. So firstly, when we talk about pathing, there's 5 big paths that have come up pretty much since these changes that are viable. The first of which is a hard farming, power farming kind of camp. So I'd recommend this is junglers like Evelyn, Hecarim, Karthus, and Olaf. It's where you start blue and you pass straight to your clugs in a linear fashion, which means you just clear blue, wolves, raptors, red, raptors, red, krugs, and then into scuttle crab, and that should hit you level 4 around 3:30 if you're good at clearing those AoE camps. The second path that I really recommend is a red to Gromp path, which is basically the opposite of this blue to Krugs one. And if you're a champion that needs red buff more, I recommend this path. So stuff like Rek'Sai, Vi, Amumu, J4, Evelyn as well, and Hecarim, of course. Champions who are really good with this path. And then if you got a more single target clearing jungler like a Kha'Zix, Rengar, or Warwick, I'd recommend just a buff to buff. So just start blue or red, whichever side gives you a leash. And then just path straight across and do the alternate camp. So it might be Gromp or Scuttle, depending on which way you path. That's a really easy way to start, and also you can maybe look for invades as well, which is the last 2 paths. So, I mean, I only recommend going for invade in low elo, especially if you kind of know what you're doing, or if you have good vision on the enemy jungler early, because invading is very risky low elo when you don't completely understand what you're doing. But a couple of champions are really good at invading and stuff like Kayn, Rek'Sai, Vi, Kha'Zix, Evelyn, Kindred. If you can play any of these champions, or start learning them really strong because they win the 1v1 quite hard. So the best path I think for invading on the champions like that are good with AoE clear, so like Kayn, Rek'Sai, and Vi, is I'd recommend just clearing full red side into an invade. So on Kayn, for example, Raptors red, Krugs are straight into invading the enemy's blue side, or on Rek'Sai red, Raptors invade. Same kind of thing for Vi as well. And if it's a single target champion, so champions that are stronger at clearing those lone camps, stuff like Kindred, Evelyn, Kha'Zix, I'd recommend just blue Gromp instantly into invading the enemy's red buff. This is really strong, especially if you're on blue side, since they'll generally get a leash the enemy jungler on the blue, so you can just simply charge through and quickly take over the entire enemy jungle, and they'll have no camps, and you can pretty much clear their entire red side by the time that scuttles up. Forces jungle to go vertical as well if they are aware of you doing this invade, which means you can set up a really nice topside mashup and allow you to play around that lane more effectively as well. So with that kind of pathing out of the way, I'll move into the junglers, or the kind of tier list, I suppose, for the junglers after these changes. I've got 3 tiers: S tier, A tier, and X tier. S tier is obviously like your best junglers, like what's completely overpowered at the moment. A tier is like the junglers that are kind of good. If you're good at them when you play them, I'd recommend picking them up. Or if they're kind of on the fringe of like getting into S tier, depending on what changes happen, etc. And then X tier kind of champions that if you're a one trick or they're really, really good and competitive. So in my S tier, I have Sejuani, Jarvan, Evelyn, Amumu, Hecarim, and Vi. These 5-6 champions are like the tip top of the iceberg. They're super strong after these changes. They're just really strong because they have a good level 3 contest, and also power farmers or champions that like to farm to level 6 are a lot more protected by these scuttle changes because they're not missing out on as much. So you said Sejuani can kind of clear a jungle without getting punished as much. Stuff like Hecarim, who just wants to clear and gets a really strong level 4. Like Hecarim's really strong just because he's clear and his pathing is so strong at the moment. And then J4 as well is one of those champions who's been strong for. Even though he with some nerfs, he's actually not dropped down too much. So that's kind of your S tier. And your A tier, it's a lot bigger. It's a lot more variety in this tier because at the moment the meta is not completely solved. In my A tier, I have Jax, Kha'Zix, Karthus, Trundle, Rek'Sai, Nunu, Rammus, and Kayn. A couple of champions I like to highlight in this tier. I think Kha'Zix is really strong if you're really good at him. just because he's able to hard farm to level 6 now and also contest you at Scuttle with a level 3, he's a very strong 1v1 in the jungle with that isolation damage. So if you're able to pull it off effectively, he's really strong. Carlos and Kane as well are two champions that are very similar. They're just very power farming champions, and given the fact they don't get punished as early for Scuttle contests, it means they're allowed to just clear their jungle and just power farm as soon as possible. Jax as well is really strong because he can power farm, he can gank, he can contest level 3. He's one of those champions who's very versatile, has early game and late game threat. And then Trundle's another champion I like to highlight as well because Trundle's sort of come into the meta because tank jungles are really strong since the buff of Cinderhulk, stuff like that. And Trundle really hard counters them with his ultimate, able to show those magic and armor resist. Moving on to our final tier, we have X tier. In X tier, I have Rengar, Nidalee, Elise, Zac, and Skarner. X tier is kind of a mixed tier because these champions are really strong by themselves, but they're only really strong if you're really, really good at them. So if you're a one trick at Rengar, Nidalee, or Elise, these champions are like S plus tier. They're super strong, but because they're so mechanically intensive and the playstyle around these champions are so high, you have to be a one trick to execute them effectively. While Zac and Skarner are champions that don't really function too well inside of solo queue, but in a competitive environment, they're very strong, and interacting with these champions with your team will be give you a much higher win rate. Overall, though, I'd recommend for climbing in your high school games, I think the strongest 4 champions I recommend you pick up are Amumu, Jax, J4, and Trundle. These 4 champions are all very good and competitive, and in solo queue, they have good carry potential, especially stuff like Amumu and Jax, since they're very reliable, and they're also relevant in team environments because they offer CC, ultimates, they can offer good team fighting, they can give you multiple win conditions, and they're just good champions to be able to play. Hecarim as well and Vi, 2 champions that I'd also recommend just on the fringe. I kind of forgot to put Vi in there actually because Vi is very strong. Easy to play, super easy ultimate to execute on, gives you health for good engage. Just not as tanky, so I think tank junglers are really strong at the moment. Anyways, that's my quick little overview of the jungle changes. If you have any questions, you can always just message us on Discord, just at Replayz in the questions channel, and I'll do what I can to help you. I hope that helped and you enjoy it. Get back to the broadcast.